before the world called him Pele, before the trophies, before the screaming crowds. He was just a little boy in Brazil who saw his father cry. And that moment changed everything. Years later, that same boy would become the only player in history to win 3 FIFA World Cups. But his journey didn't begin with a trophy. It began with a promise. A promise made by a child who had no idea how difficult it would be to keep. In 1950, Brazil lost the World Cup final at home to Uruguay. Pelé was only 9 years old. He remembered seeing his father, Dondinho, devastated beside the radio. The boy didn't understand the weight of history. He only understood that his father was hurting. So Pelé made him a promise. One day, he would win the World Cup for him. At that moment, it sounded like something a child might say. But 8 years later, the impossible happened. Pelé wasn't born into football royalty. His family lived modestly. His father had been a footballer himself, but money was never guaranteed. The young Edson Arantes do Nascimento learned early that talent alone would not change his life. He played football wherever he could, on streets, in small spaces, with whatever could be kicked. Sometimes the ball wasn't even a real ball, but something was developing, not just skill, imagination. Then someone noticed him. Former Brazilian striker Waldemar de Brito saw the teenager's unusual ability and took him to Santos. The prediction was bold. He believed this boy could become the best player in the world. At Santos, the teenager was given a chance. And in 1956, at only 15 years old, Pelé scored on his first team debut. The boy who had once played in the streets had entered professional football, but nobody knew how quickly his life was about to change. Then came the biggest stage, the 1958 World Cup. Pelé was only 17, and even before the tournament truly began, there were doubts about whether someone so young could handle the pressure. He was a teenager surrounded by experienced professionals. But sometimes, age tells you how long someone has lived. It doesn't tell you how much they've already endured. And when Pelé finally stepped onto the World Cup stage, the world discovered something it had never seen before. Pelé scored his first World Cup goal against Wales. He was 17. Then came the semifinal against France. Pelé scored 3 times, 3 goals, 1 teenage, 1 tournament. And suddenly Brazil's young player wasn't simply participating in the World Cup. He was changing it. But the biggest moment was still waiting. The final, Brazil against Sweden, and Pelé was about to become a global legend. In the 1958 World Cup final, Pelé scored twice. One of those goals became unforgettable. At 17 years old, he flicked the ball over a defender and volleyed it into the net. Then came the celebration. A teenager, surrounded by teammates, crying. The world had just witnessed something extraordinary. And somewhere far away was the father who had once cried beside a radio. Pelé had kept his promise. The teenager became a phenomenon. At Santos, Pelé continued to dominate. Goals multiplied. Trophies followed. His name spread beyond Brazil. And eventually, the world gave him a title that seemed impossible for a boy from a modest background. Oh hey, the king. But greatness comes with a price. The higher Pelé climbed, the more the world expected from him. And the next chapter would teach him that even legends can be broken. The 1966 World Cup was different. Pelé was repeatedly targeted by opponents. Injuries limited him. Brazil were eliminated in the group stage. For a player who had seemed almost untouchable, it was a brutal reminder. Talent doesn't make you invincible. Sometimes the game takes something from you. And sometimes you have to decide whether you are finished or whether you will return. Pelé chose to return. 4 years later, Pelé returned to the World Cup. But this time, he wasn't simply the young genius. He was experienced, scarred, and under enormous pressure. Brazil needed to win. Pelé later admitted that the 1970 tournament was harder. for him emotionally than 1958, because everyone expected him to succeed. That is the hidden side of greatness. The first victory proves you can win. The next one asks whether you can survive the expectations. Mexico, 1970. Pele was surrounded by extraordinary teammates. Gerson, Jairzinho, Rivellino, Tostão, Carlos Alberto. But Pele remained the center of Brazil's imagination. And match after match, he delivered. The teenager who had once been questioned for being too young was now leading one of the greatest teams football had ever seen. But the final would decide everything. June 21st, 1970. Brazil versus Italy. The stakes were enormous. Whoever won would become the first nation to claim 3 World Cup titles. And Pele opened the scoring. A powerful header. Brazil 1, Italy 0. Italy fought back, but Brazil kept coming. Gerson, Jairzinho, and finally, Carlos Alberto. The final ended 4-1. Brazil were champions, and Pele had become the first and still only player to win the World Cup 3 times. But perhaps the most beautiful moment wasn't Pele's own goal. It was his pass. Carlos Alberto came charging forward. Pele saw him. One perfectly weighted pass, and history was made. That moment tells us something about greatness. The greatest player doesn't always need to take the final shot. Sometimes greatness means seeing the opportunity before everyone else does, and giving someone else the chance to finish it. But Pele's story wasn't perfect. He suffered injuries. He faced pressure. He experienced disappointment. And behind the legendary image was a human being who knew fear too. That matters. Because if Pele had never struggled, his story would only be impressive. The struggle is what makes it meaningful. He wasn't born knowing how the story would end. He simply kept moving forward, one difficult chapter at a time. Pele eventually became much more than a footballer. His influence crossed borders. He helped turn football into a truly global spectacle. For millions, he became their first image of Brazilian football. Joy, creativity, confidence, freedom. That was the magic. Pele didn't simply play football. He made people believe football could be art. But here's the question. What actually made Pele different? Was it his speed? His technique? His finishing? Yes, but those things alone don't explain the legend. The deeper answer was belief. A boy watched his father cry, and instead of accepting that pain as the end, he turned it into a destination. That is the real story of Pele. Most dreams don't begin with certainty. They begin with a feeling, a promise, a decision, a moment when you decide, I don't know how I'll get there, but I'm going to try. Pele didn't know he would win 3 World Cups. He didn't know millions would call him king. He was just a boy trying to make something good come from a painful moment. And sometimes that's where greatness begins. One promise, 3 World Cups, a career that changed football forever. But perhaps the most powerful image isn't Pele holding a trophy. It's the little boy who once looked at his father and decided that one day he would make him proud. That boy became Pele, the king. But before he became a legend, he was simply someone who refused to let a painful moment define his future. If stories like Pele's remind you that greatness begins long before anyone believes in you, subscribe to Grit and Glory Stories, because we don't just tell you how legends won. We uncover the struggle that made them. And our next story is already waiting. Pele once made a promise as a child. He could never have known how far that promise would take him. From a modest home to the biggest stadiums on earth. From a boy listening to his father cry to the man carrying the World Cup. And maybe that's the lesson. You don't need to know how the story ends. You only need the courage to begin writing it. Because every legend starts somewhere. Sometime with a struggle. Sometime with a promise. And sometime with a little boy who simply refuses to give up. This is Grit and Glory Stories.